you. Enjoy it, panelists. Yeah, I can. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good break and perhaps got the chance to meet some of your fellow attendees. Now, our next panel is focused on multimodality, creating an integrated journey that we were talking about earlier this morning. For far too long, the nation has fallen victim to disjointed journeys, and this has wider impacts too, socially, economically, and environmentally. Mobility as a service is presenting passengers with the chance to take control of their travel needs, hopefully creating a seamless journey. Using data to bring together different modes of transport, the intention is to deliver a high-quality service with customers, of course, at the heart. Whether a customer is using the bus, a scooter, or bike alongside rail, the whole journey should be reliable and easy to use and plan. So joining me for this discussion are Roel Zuidema, Global Lead for Rail and Ground Transport Business at Atos, Nick Beck, Data and Digital Leader London for ARUP, Dave Williams, IT and Digital Services Director for TfW, and Lampros Yfantis, Graduate Research Fellow at MaaSLab, BSEER University College London. Welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for taking part. I'd just like to remind everyone, though, if they have got any questions for any of our guests, don't forget you can take advantage of our live Q&A function, and I will endeavour to remember to have a look at the live Q&A function, because this is very much a conversation and we want you all to take part. So Lampros, maybe we can just kick off with you, if we may. And just to be clear right from the beginning for everybody, for me and everybody in our audience, what is mobility as a service, and what's the vision, if you like?
Yes, definitely. Sorry. Mobility as a service is a new scheme where we have a new operator in the market. The main vision of mobility as a service is basically to create a transition of a state from ownership, of asset ownership to asset usership. So the main vision is basically to attract private vehicle users and owners, and basically provide more attractive visible and invisible travel alternatives in an effort to reduce dependencies to private cars. So we have an entity which is very often called a broker or an integrator, where this particular entity does not own any capacity, purchases capacity, but doesn't own any fleet, doesn't operate any fleet. We're talking about the one-stop shop solution for customers. We have a solution where it offers basically mobility through either bundling options, the mobility bundles, or the mobility plans, as called, like in the telecommunications industry, or the traditional pay-as-you-go option. It is a concept where we have access to different mobility solutions, whether this is mass transit, whether this is parking, shared or on-demand services. And of course, we have the integration of the main services needed in order to plan, book, pay, and access any potential service in the transport system.
Well, it sounds great in theory. Roel, what are your thoughts? And, will this help passengers connect multimodal journeys and make them seamless, which of course is the aim?
Yes, absolutely. I think we are now living in a period of time where people would like to be treated personalized. So everybody would like to do his own personal thing. So I believe that, and I'm surely believe that MaaS will adapt to that in terms of easy selection of the methods and the way you would like to travel from A to B, where you have to pay only once for the whole journey. Where you can make your own choices for which leg you go by bus or by train, for which part of the journey you go by bike or by scooter, or even an electrical car or whatever, and make the journey you like to make, and in your own let's say way of doing this, where some people are going for the shortest time, the other for the less carbonization and things like that. So I truly believe that MaaS has a huge future, and as already said, I think there are new parties entering the market to help people using that.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask, Roel. I mean, I love the idea of a bespoke journey, and where you plan the whole thing, you know, rail, bike, scooter, whichever mode of transport you choose. But how do we help passengers make mobility planning and booking and paying easier and take the pain out of all that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there are, if you look to the, let's say, the progress of the technology and the trends in the future, I think now we have so much data available per person. We can already, let's say, build the journey for somebody based on its own preferences in the past. So that helps in easiness. To let's say to reduce the cycle of booking and paying your journey. That's one thing. We get new technologies like chat bots and voice bots to help you with that. As a chatbot to simply ask questions. Hey, I'm going from King's Cross to the Wembley Stadium. What can I do best? And then you get some advices. And I think in the near future, let's say from 3 till 5 years from now, I think the voice bot will take over from the chatbot. So then you get a kind of a Siri kind of functionality that you talk to your iPhone, and together with your iPhone, you are building your journey. And at the end of building the journey, your iPhone says, "Well, how do you pay? With your credit card?" Yes, okay, I make the transaction for you. I think that's the future, and that future is not far from now.
No, the future is coming very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It'll still involve some human beings, and that we won't all be just talking to our phones all the time. But Nick, what in your mind does an integrated journey mean, both for the user and the operator?
Well, so I think that, again, lots of people, when we talk about MaaS, focus on the user, and it's the seamlessness of the journey. But I think we've also got to understand that, we're in a position now where we've got a very diffuse system, and what we need to think about is actually what's the outcome of MaaS for our cities and for our areas. If within a city like London, if the government wants to say, actually, we want to encourage people to make more decarbonized journeys, we want to try and spread the load across what is a very overburdened system in some places. We've also got to think, it's an integrated journey, not just for an individual. It's the integrated journey of all journeys across the city, so that if there's an accident, that you could use a MaaS platform and some kind of MaaS integration to try and say, well, actually, we're going to try and route people around it. We're going to try and encourage them on different modes, but we've got to also make sure that we've got kind of equity of accessibility, so that actually, I would feel that we should all be quite comfortable that if you are, for example, a wheelchair user, that the MaaS options that are offered to you should be different from the MaaS options that are offered to someone else who could maybe get on and use an e-scooter or a rental bike. And so I think that the next step for MaaS is not just to think about, again, that individual outcome and the individual integrated journey, but what are we trying to achieve within a city or a region or an area?
I think you made some really good points there, and I think accessibility will be a theme that sort of rolls through the day for us. Dave, what's holding back multimodal ticketing?
Good question, actually. I think what we need is standardization of ticketing formats across bus operators and rail operators for interoperability, standardization of interfaces, and accessing shared mobility. We need looser standards, and I think this is an area which is stopping multimodal travel and pay-as-you-go, and the ability for people to get the best value for their journey, and take them away from the car.
Do you think as well, Dave, that we might learn a lot, and we'll learn a lot later on in the day when we're talking to Transport for London? Because certainly if you're based in London, you use your Oyster card or your credit card and you swipe in, and you know that you're getting the best price for that time of day. You don't have to sort of plan that in advance. Do you think we can learn from that kind of technology?
Oh, most definitely. I think everyone is looking to implement EMV, pay-as-you-go standards, where you tap in and tap out. London is it's quite advantageous in that it's a city, and you can split that up into zones. When you start expanding that to, and if you're looking in Wales, Southeast Wales, Southwest Wales, going up to North Wales, it becomes a little bit harder with multiple operators. But yeah, that's where it all comes back to standardization of tickets and yeah, agreements between organisations with capping of fares.
I think those agreements are really key. Sometimes I travel up north and you'll, you know, perhaps with a Hull train, for example, and then you realise your ticket doesn't work on a northeast train, and sometimes the Hull train isn't working. And, you know, it would be nice. Sometimes there's a bit of common sense that's needed at the platform when you see empty trains going out, and a bit of, you know what, actually just get on that. There's no point you waiting 3 hours for the next one. But I think having a better relationship between operators will really help the passenger experience. And Lampros, I just wonder what you see as the main challenges and burdens, if you like, to achieve smooth multimodality.
Well, considering that we're talking about multimodal journeys, I think the main challenge, and everybody would agree with me, is data. Openness in data, standardized APIs, regulations that will, in a way, enforce mobility service providers, data providers for the traffic and the network system to have APIs that MaaS operators, integrators can actually get data from. So the platform development side and the data aspect is a very important element for for the computation of a multimodal journey. So a multimodal journey does require a lot of high quality data in terms of both infrastructure, service status, traffic status. So all these need to come together in a way, in a smart way, and in multi-objective way that will basically cover the needs of all the potential passengers, the preferences of all the potential passengers. So I think the main challenge is this. And then the other challenge that I see very tricky to solve is basically an efficient payment and ticketing system, like Dave just mentioned. I think we're transitioning to open loop ticketing systems. The idea of a digital wallet is actually a very nice idea. The convenience of using MaaS is one of the main attractors of this particular scheme, and this is what we need to focus on even more. But also what Nick mentioned on going from not just on the user-centric personalized side of the service, but also having a more policy integration within these kind of schemes in order to help either vulnerable groups or achieve sustainability goals in city.
Yeah, I think, Roel, data is a really important area to you, and I'm just wondering, you know, what could data-driven insight add to regain the trust of passengers when, you know, we're making choices?
Yes, indeed, data is the goal, the new gold for the next decades. So first of all, it is very important that parties who at one hand are partners to each other, but also competitors of each other, that they share their data on a fair way, that it doesn't harm their commercial interest, but it helps the customer to make the right choices. So I think that having reliable data, but also data which let's say is compliant to your personal privacy and things like that, will help customers to rely on MaaS kinds of solutions to plan and pay their journeys with. So it's very important that the data is reliable and compliance to privacy laws, and that will indeed attract and appetize potential customers to book their journey with MaaS-like solutions.
And Dave, what data can we get from MaaS, and how does that make us design better railways?
Well, at the moment, I don't think we know where our customers are and what our customers do. At the moment, we're very focused on selling tickets, whereas with MaaS, you know where they're going to start, you know where they're going to go, so you can use that data to plan your network more efficiently, plan new routes, understand where people want to go from A to C and how they get there. It's essential that we get the data on our customers so we know what they want, and then we can offer them whichever modes of transport they want to use.
Let's bring Nick into the conversation. Nick, you've had, I think, more than 15 years experience in data analytics.
Yeah.
So talk us through, the barriers to using data across transport modes and maybe what approaches benefit most from improvements in data.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things here. There's a technical challenge of how do you bring data from one place and use it generally. So we talked a bit about open standards. We talked about interoperability, APIs. I think what we need to think about is actually lots of data when it is generated for a specific purpose. It's really, you can get fantastic data about forecast bus arrival times or forecast timetables. If you want to take that data and use it to do some more strategic planning, or you want to use that data to do something that is beyond that, and I want to understand bus punctuality over the last year, actually that data is not particularly useful for that. There's a huge amount of work and transformation required to take this new oil that is the data and turn it into something useful for a purpose. And so I think there is a role here also, again, to not just think about individual operators, but again, the governance and the oversight of these systems, because actually, if I am a ride sharing company, sharing a load of my data to allow an e-bike rental scheme to take a load of my customers is not in my best interest. But actually, as again, a city operator, it may well be in my best interest to decarbonize, get vehicles off the road. And so I think we need to think not just about technically how do we join the data up. We need to think about data as an asset, which is something that I've said pretty much consistently over my entire career. At some point, someone may actually listen to actually think about data beyond where you collect it. So actually, how might this data be useful in the next 5-10 years? And actually, which bits of data are not going to be that useful? Because again, I think we can overload and try and take the data and fit it to our problem, rather than the thing that we've always advocated is what's the outcome you're trying to achieve and how does insight feed that? And then actually what data creates that insight, because data is nothing unless you've actually done something with it that gives you an actionable insight. You've got to make a decision. You've got to take an action from the data to do something. And so I think the places where we benefit most from integration of data is not when we're thinking about modes. It's when we're thinking about people, because people are what we care about in a multimodal world. And as Roel said, it's data privacy, GDPR are all really key things to think about when we're trying to do that. So I'd say that the mantra of data has massive value in it. It does. It's what I've built my career on, but it's not easy to get that value, and we need to actually understand the outcomes we're achieving with the data when we go through that process.
Nick, Julie is asking, isn't data lost when using EMV?
Again, it depends on your system. I think this is it. I think the idea that we should capture and store every single piece of data forever is one route, and there's a lot of positives to that. There's a load of downsides in terms of storage, and again, we need to think about when we're entering into contracts for MaaS systems or MaaS integration, to make sure that we're not tying ourselves into a commercial bound where there are examples globally where cities have had to pay twice. They've had to pay a MaaS operator to integrate their city, and then they have to pay again towards the end of the contract to get their data out, because it was never provided for as part of the contract to share the data. And that's why you need to think of it as an asset, where when I do say come in, run the MaaS infrastructure in my city, part of the deal is that you need to provide data back to me as the overall integrator in the city, who may also in a lot of cases be some of the people running the public transport systems. So you get this very messy or very complex set of data ownership, data regulation, data legislation that needs a very considered and strategic view at the beginning, before you actually you just run straight ahead and go, yes, give me all the apps in the world, and then at the end realize all you've done is outsourced all the value into private companies that you don't have any control over.
Roel, you've been nodding away there as Nick's been speaking.
I fully agree, because there are two important stakeholders you have to protect, in the sense that there are, of course, the passengers, the travelers at one hand, but also the mobility providers at the other hand. So they have their, let's say, commercial interest, and they to a certain extent, they don't want to share data with others when they feel that that gives them a competitive disadvantage. So we have to protect them as well. And then we have organized it on the right way for the different MaaS stakeholders, I think. Yeah.
Just while you're on there, Roel, Glyn says that he agrees with what you've been saying. He says that we should be able to purchase a ticket that covers end to end of the journey, i.e. bus, train, river, and maybe taxi. Is it something that's possible, though, because of different companies' profits, Glyn's asking?
Well, if you look to the, let's say, the commercial e-commerce providers like Amazon and others, there you can put everything in your basket, and then you have to pay once for all the different articles you are buying. And I think the same could apply for MaaS as well, so that you pay for the journey rather for the different legs. So you pay once for using the train, the bike, the taxi, and everybody gets his share of it. So, and we are working on a platform for the Paris tourist office. And there we see the same thing, that you can buy your whole journey, and every party who is delivering a part is paid for its share.
Wow. So, well, if you need anyone to test how it's going in Paris, then just give me a shout.
Yes, well, I think it should be ready for the Olympic Games, because that's of course the proof, the real proof of pudding. But yes, I think. But Amazon and other e-commerce platforms are doing it for many years already. So we can learn from them, the do's and the don'ts, how to organize it.
Let's bring Lampros back into the conversation. Lampros, how can AI and behavioral economics contribute to increased passenger satisfaction in MaaS?
Yeah, exactly. So, like David mentioned, and Nick actually, so there's a ton of data collected from MaaS operators with regard to travel patterns of individuals. Of course, there are the GDPR concerns that always we need to think of, but we need to take advantage of these data in a way that we will increase the personalization of the service that is provided in mobility as a service schemes. So increasing passenger satisfaction is a very important aspect of MaaS, since all the trials that we've seen so far and actual real life schemes that are being applied in different cities, mainly in Europe, we see that a lot of the early and late adopters, but mainly the early adopters, are very interested in a personalized service that will be able to recommend journeys, whether this is unimodal or multimodal, that are attractive to them. So I think that using AI and behavioral economics in this kind of technology in that context is very important in order to personalize the whole trip, the whole journey, the type of modes, the type of routes that are going to be followed based on specific preferences on the user's needs.
We've got about 4 minutes left, so I'm drawing back to the questions. Nigel says, I'm not sure who's going to answer this one. Nigel says, this is slightly devil's advocate question, but with all this talk of data, isn't the first issue to get around the willingness of different operators to be prepared to have their ticket also work on another one's system? The German and Swiss railway bus services have been offering integrated tickets at least since the 70s, when computer data was scarce. You're right there. We've had such a silo mentality over here, probably because everyone, and then of course the questions jumped. Why have we had a silo mentality? Let me go back to that. We've had a silo mentality over here, probably because everyone focuses on profit rather than the best journey for the passengers. Who feels able to tackle Nigel's question? Nick?
So I'd completely agree. I think, again, focus for MaaS is on the technological challenge. I think there is also, as I've talked about quite a lot about it, the kind of regulatory challenge, which is actually none of these individual operators are incentivized to open up ticketing. So you need a kind of regulatory governmental part of this, which is to say, actually, you can't have a license to operate if you're not sharing your ticketing in this way. Because again, what we've got to remember is that, you know, these private providers are there to make a profit, and what we need to do is say, well, actually, that the only control we really have is to say, well, actually, you can or cannot operate. And I mean, you look at some of the arguments that Uber's had in various cities around the world around licensing, including London. And again, that's probably the biggest lever that you need to pull. You need an external motivator to say, actually, integrated ticketing, yeah, you may not want to do it, but actually you've got no choice. And I think that's, you know, you look at something like the TfL integrated ticketing across trains, tubes and buses and TfL rail, you know, that is a single operator effectively. And that's why they're able to do that. And so we need, I would say, a stronger hand to make that actually not something that is optional that we should do for the good of the passengers. It's something that is compulsory for you to continue operating.
Dave, is the future of go on. Is the future, do you think, Dave, of MaaS public sector led or commercial led?
Okay.
Did you hear the question?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, yeah, a few things, I think. One, MaaS will only work if we sort out who owns the customer, because that's key. And when you've got all these modes of transport, who does the customer phone if there's a problem? Should they be going to an individual operator, or should they be going to a central area? So that was one thing I wanted to say. When you were talking about ticketing, our systems in the UK are all based upon back office settlements. But what MaaS does is give us the ability to sort out the ticketing in the front office and then pay operators. And finally, your question about should it be public led or private led? I know of instances where there are companies in the private sector who are interested in providing a service and moving people around and not too worried about the customer. So in that sort of scenario, it can be either. But there's definitely a big impetus on the public sector to try and smooth this out and get people to, or organizations to communicate with each other so that we can actually interchange tickets and cap tickets, and focus more on the customer, I think. And yeah, that's on the profit.
We are out of time, but I'd just like to give the very last word to Lampros, if I may, because we haven't touched on the environmental impact on MaaS and whether we can bring in any decarbonisation incentives into loyalty programs or anything like that. But what have the early trials shown about potential social, economic and the environmental impact of MaaS? Just briefly, that's not brief.
Yes, definitely. So it's quite clear from the early trials that we have, not just in Europe, but in Australia and other continents as well, that MaaS does indeed have the potential to reduce car ownership and car usage. It's not just public transport, let's say, users that are choosing MaaS. There are also other population segments which are very inclined into using private cars, to buying MaaS bundles, buying MaaS plans. And the early findings are showing us that there is a big potential for reducing emissions through reducing the private vehicle ownership and usage.
It's a very positive note to end on. We could carry on all day. There's so much to ask you, but thank you all to my panelists. You are all superb. Thank you for taking part. And I think you'll agree there are some really interesting uses of data and technology being considered here that I hope will leave you, our audience, inspired. Right now, though, I'd like to introduce you to our next keynote speaker, Richard Scott. Richard is Director of Corporate Affairs at West Coast Partnership. He'll be looking at the response to COVID in rail and what the future looks like in terms of increasing customer numbers. So I'd like to hand over the virtual stage to you, Richard.
Great, thanks, Helen. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I'm Richard Scott, as Helen says, the Director of Corporate Affairs at West Coast Partnership. And just in case you're not aware, the West Coast Partnership runs both the existing Yfantis West Coast operation, but also includes the shadow operator for HS2. That's West Coast Partnership Development. Today, though, I'm going to talk about what we've been doing to improve the customer experience on our trains and at our stations, and what we aim to achieve in the future to deliver the best possible service for our passengers. So if we can have the first slide, please. The first thing we obviously need to do is listen to our customers. As a team, we've been working hard to understand the changing needs and priorities of our customers. And that could be those who are traveling with us now already that have come back, or ones that are planning to come back in the next few weeks or months, or even those that are still undecided about whether they will ever come back to rail at all. And where we always start, of course, in customer experience is improvement. There's always things that all of us could do better. So we know from work undertaken by Transport Focus, as well as our own customer surveys, panels, direct customer feedback through social media, that there are key customer priorities. These are things like COVID, of course, and safe travel, punctuality and reliability, support during disruption, user-friendly booking, value for money, onboard connectivity, of course, and the availability of assistance from our people when it's needed. Of course, even before the pandemic, I can hear you saying most of these were priorities that we were working hard to address. However, the pandemic has created new priorities for customers, and that's changed the face of the rail industry now and for the future. So on the next slide, please, there are increased expectations that people have now, of course, for space, comfort, cleanliness at stations and on board. And these are going to continue even after the risks of COVID-19 dissipate or disappear entirely. Enhanced cleaning at stations and on trains that all train operators do could well become permanent fixtures, particularly as we're looking to deal with customer perceptions. And we want to make people feel safe all the time and tackle their perceptions at every stage. And in total, we've been cleaning an additional 2,000 extra cleaning hours per period at our stations. We use long-lasting sanitizer on our trains, and there are hand sanitizer units in every station. And this, I'm pleased to report, has been extremely successful. Network Rail recently conducted 2 lots of testing, one in January, another in June, at 4 stations served by Yfantis West Coast. That's London Euston, Birmingham New Street, Liverpool Lime Street, and Manchester Piccadilly. Heavily touched areas like escalator handles were swabbed, while hour-long air samples were checked for airborne virus. And tests were repeated on trains running between the stations, which included Yfantis West Coast trains. And I'm delighted that the results showed absolutely no traces of COVID-19 at all at the stations or on board trains. And I think that demonstrates the success of the industry's commitment to the safety of staff and passengers, and the effectiveness of the extra cleaning that's been put in place to protect against the virus. Next slide, please. Of course, the response to the pandemic can't be allowed to get in the way of improvements for customer service. We've got to make changes, but we still need to improve as well and progress just as we always intended to do. So we've recently introduced at-seat ordering and click and collect, where customers can order food and drink from their seat. This has been really successful, over 90% of customers rating at-seat order as excellent or good. COVID has seen consumers move more and more, of course, towards online and cashless payments. So we've accelerated our use of digital tickets and introduced our own smart card. There are also new features in our digital channels where customers can get updates on busy trains, and we've introduced Track My Train, which lets customers follow the progress of the train they're using and check its onboard facilities. We recently introduced a new website and customer app, and we'll be building on this foundation through an ambitious program of new features for the website and the app and station retailing channels, which we'll introduce over the coming months. The aim of all of this investment, of course, is to help customers feel in greater control of their journey. I think that is what customers want these days. It's about more than just buying tickets. It's about real-time updates on the entire end-to-end journey, including in times of disruption, of course. That's crucial and relevant to the customer's specific journey plan. People want it to be personalised, and they don't necessarily want to have to go to social media and ask specific questions. If they can self-serve and get personalised information themselves, so much the better. So let's move on to attracting customers back to rail, and that'll be the next slide, please. In terms of passenger numbers, we're expecting recovery to be led by leisure travel. We saw that last year in the summer when the lockdown was eased, and we're seeing it again now. People are looking at holidays in this country and getting back to seeing friends and family that they might not have seen for a long time. So leisure travel is definitely driving the recovery for us. The car, of course, has always been our biggest threat and competitor. And because of the pandemic, the battle between the car and rail has become even more significant for us. And now we have a new competitor in the form of Teams and Zoom. And in many respects, this makes the competition for passengers fiercer than ever. So to help attract passengers back to trains, next month, we're formally introducing a new 3-class proposition. This includes standard class with the at-seat order and improved Wi-Fi. It has premium, standard premium for customers who want to pay a bit more for extra space and comfort. And it's got an improved first class experience with an enhanced first class menu available 7 days a week, as well as the additional space and comfort, of course. And that really will be a bespoke service. The first stage in this process was a soft launch of standard premium upgrades in May, with standard premium reservations now available online for people to book for travel dates from the 13th of September. And in July, we began the UK's biggest ever train fleet upgrade, with works underway to refurbish all 56 of our iconic Pendolinos. This is a £117 million investment, and it'll see the whole fleet transformed, including a new design with brand new seats throughout standard, as well as a new Yfantis West Coast look and feel throughout the train, a new onboard cafe bar for people to meet and socialise, additional luggage space and refurbished toilets. And as these refurbished trains gradually start to enter service, this will provide a real boost for customer perceptions of comfort, cleanliness, value for money. We've also got a significant investment in Wi-Fi over the next 2 years, which will improve quality and reliability, because we're going to fill in with our partners at BT those spots on the network with no onboard connectivity. So that'll make a big improvement to people's ability to use their journeys, be productive, or just enjoy things on their devices at their own leisure. We're also looking to improve the end-to-end experience, which of course is something that people are very keen to improve by working in a more collaborative way than ever before with Network Rail, other TOCs, bus companies, local authorities. For example, we're adopting a joint approach to training staff at Birmingham New Street. So all of our people can offer consistent, high quality assistance for customers, including information on local public transport links, not just our own trains. And we're investing in the station environment to provide more information for connections with other modes of transport. We'll also improve secure cycle storage facilities. More and more people want to cycle to the station, so we'll address that. Electric vehicle charging points at car parks and automatic number plate recognition for those car parks as well, just to make life a bit easier. And I'd like to end on the final slide just with a short comment about partnership working and ongoing industry change. We share the government's ambitious objectives to build back better, to level up, and we see our role in this as providing the investment, innovation and improvement that drives connectivity and growth across the UK. And I'm sure I speak for the whole of the rail industry when I say that. That'll deliver better and greener infrastructure and better passenger outcomes. So we'll continue to work with government and all our stakeholders to make sure we get this right. Collaboration is at the heart of our approach. We're called the West Coast Partnership for a reason. Partnership is key. We want to make it easier than ever for stakeholders to do business with us. And we all share a common goal, I think, of making things better for the customer and the communities that we serve. And we have a really great, genuine opportunity to do just that over the coming years. So thank you very much for listening.
Richard, it's great to know what rail looks like moving forward. It all sounds very exciting on the West Coast, and obviously really encouraging to hear that you're listening to what your customers want. So thank you very much. Now, remember, if you want to engage further with our exhibitors, check out the digital marketplace. We're going to take another short break. I'll see you back for your next session on the station experience in 10 minutes. So join me then. Lovely.